This week on Business Brief, we hear about a program in St. Louis putting a new spin on baby bonds. Then we learn why an agriculture expert believes many farmers should stop making their own hay. Welcome back to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Noah Grabianski, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Juliana Mejia. It's good to be here.
Now, Juliana, this isn't your first time on the show since you came on and talked to Yasha last week, but it is your first time hosting. What have you been working on at MBA over the summer?
I've spent the last 10 weeks focused on government and healthcare coverage. Topics ranging from national cryptocurrency legislation and Missouri's healthcare workforce to local impacts of tariffs.
Well, it's really great to have you on. Are you ready to get into some headlines?
Yeah.
Boeing machinists went on strike Monday morning after union members rejected the company's second contract offer in 2 weeks. That includes over 3,000 employees in St. Louis, St. Charles, and Muscatau, Illinois. The last rejected contract offered a 20% general wage increase over 4 years, as well as resolve the schedule dispute from the first rejected contract offer. This comes a month after Boeing was awarded a $20 billion contract to provide new F-47 fighter jets to the U.S. Air Force. Seattle Boeing employees who were involved in a similar strike last year eventually negotiated a wage increase of 38% over 4 years.
A recent audit of St. Louis public schools showed a rating of poor, the worst possible rating to be given out by the state auditor. The audit began as a review of spending issues that arose under former Superintendent Keisha Scarlett, who was fired last year. The audit says that deficit spending in the district doubled in fiscal year 2025 from the year before, with the pattern projected to continue into 2026. The district may have also violated state law by giving out $3.5 million in performance-based raises and larger salaries for cabinet and members without board approval. State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick says that SLPS is currently on track to run out of funds by 2031.
A St. Louis County bill regulating intoxicating hemp products will be revisited in September after a final vote Tuesday stalled amid opposition from business owners and community members. Bill sponsor Lisa Clancy says she plans to revisit the bill's language ahead of another hearing next month. The bill seeks to prohibit products such as beverages and edibles, sometimes labeled as Delta 8 or hemp-derived Delta 9, from being sold outside of marijuana dispensaries. Some business owners have said that the bill would put them out of business, but Clancy has called those allegations unfounded.
President Donald Trump and Apple CEO Tim Cook announced that Apple will invest an additional $100 billion in U.S. manufacturing over the next 4 years, bringing the total to $600 billion in that time frame. The investments aim to bring more of Apple's supply chain and advanced manufacturing to the United States, likely to avoid tariff costs. This comes a few weeks after Apple forged a $500 million deal with MP Materials, which runs the only rare earth materials producer in the country.
Pharmaceutical and crop science company Bayer recently settled around 17,000 legal cases over claims that its Roundup weed killer causes cancer. It also added over $1 billion to its glyphosate litigation fund Wednesday. The German firm still faces about 61,000 unresolved Roundup cases and continues to defend the product's safety in court. Bayer has had operations in St. Louis since its 2018 acquisition of agribusiness giant Monsanto. With it, the company also acquired a number of legal liabilities with Monsanto's products, including those containing the herbicide glyphosate. So, Juliana, what do you know about baby bonds?
And not much. What are they? Itty-bitty investments?
Well, simply put, baby bonds are long-term investment programs. Parents and organizations invest money in a child's future right when they're born, hence the term baby bonds. When the child turns of age, at 17 or 18, the child, now an adult, gets access to the funds and can use them for a number of applicable uses.
I see. So why do you bring them up?
Well, there's a program in St. Louis putting a new spin on the baby bond concept. It's a collaboration between Mobility Capital Finance, which is a financial technology company, the James S. McDonald Foundation, and Edward Jones. It's called the On Our Block St. Louis Investment Program, and it's investing in rising 8th graders in the city and county.
So the funds are returned in 5 years instead of 17 or 18.
Exactly. This week I got the chance to sit down with Jason Purnell and Stanley Toussaint, two of the men putting this program together. Here's a part of that conversation. Well, Jason and Stanley, thank you very much for joining me today. Can you guys introduce yourselves real quick?
I'm Jason Purnell. I'm president of the James S. McDonald Foundation in St. Louis.
So I'm Stanley Toussaint, Director of Municipal Engagements at Mobility Capital Finance, also known as Mocify. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for coming on. Can you guys tell me a bit about how the On Our Block program first came together?
So at Mocify, like our core business is partnering with government and not-for-profits to really help them roll out and introduce into the market their economic objectives. So we've been working in the city of St. Louis for a number of years now. Through that partnership with local government, we had this opportunity to pitch innovative economic and community development projects. One of the ideas that we came up with was baby bonds. This probably was like in 2023. And given Jason's background and expertise, we have a common friend and supporter who kind of runs the community engagement strategy at Edward Jones, who kind of brought us together to not only to pitch to the city to potentially do this at scale using public dollars. I'll save the details. It didn't go as planned, but right around that time, uh, Jason was taking the helm at the James S. McDonald Foundation, and we connected. And he said, "Hey, this is something that he'd be interested in funding and helping us kind of get it off the ground." And it's been a roller coaster ride since then, but it's been one of the best rides.
For people who don't really know what this On Our Block program is, can you explain a little bit about what you're trying to do?
We've been able to raise with philanthropic support from the James S. McDonald Foundation $1.5 million. And that will be broken down into 300 students will receive a $5,000 seed investment that will be invested into the US stock market, and it'll grow over a 5 year period, earning a market rate return. At, let's say, once they turn 18, they'll then be able to withdraw the funds for certain eligible uses. And some of those eligible uses are, let's say, they wanted to invest in their community by being a homeowner, if they wanted to create jobs by being an entrepreneur, if they further wanted to kind of invest in themselves by continuing their education, whether that is through traditional higher ed or vocational education. And lastly, if you just don't know what you want to do and you would rather use that money and put towards, let's say, retirement, we could roll the funds over into an IRA.
I would just add that the real thrust of this is to make sure that young people have assets in their name. We know from research that comes out of the Center for Social Development at Washington University that children who have assets in their name are more likely to complete and persist higher education, that their caregivers have higher expectations for their life outcomes, and that several states have enacted policies to invest with particular focus on college savings. The interesting thing about this program is that there's a wide range of eligible uses. So it really is about not only teaching young people about financial education, financial literacy, but actually having some finances to go along with that that support their growth and development.
You mentioned that there's a wide variety of these eligible uses. How else does this program compare to some of the other baby bond programs that have been around?
One of the differences is the acceleration into the eighth grade year. What we wanted to see in this particular pilot was if you accelerated the deployment of those assets, could you begin to see some of those outcomes sooner than investment at birth? So the 5 year of investment with Edward Jones should yield a set of assets that those young people can use as they're beginning to launch once they turn 18.
Like one of the criticisms of just, let's say, the classical baby bond program is that it just takes too long to measure the impact of it. The state of Connecticut, they're the state to not only enact legislation, but actually launch their program in 2024. They now have, at least for the first cohort, let's say 17 years before they actually start to see what the true effectiveness of that policy is. So with our program, we'll be able to kind of measure the effectiveness a lot sooner.
With such a wide variety of these eligible uses that people can use them for when they turn 18, how do you see this program impacting the economy in, the 5-year term as well as long term?
It's certainly the case that investments in things like home ownership, investments in the future potential of education, contributes to the workforce, contributes to the tax base, contributes to the stability of neighborhoods in the St. Louis region. So what we're hoping to demonstrate is that this can work and is feasible at a small scale, and then look at scaling beyond this initial pilot.
And what would scaling beyond kind of look like to you?
Well, we've challenged our partners at Mocha Phi and our other partners to think about sustainable and scalable impact for this type of intervention that certainly might include public funds, but could also include mechanisms by which private funds could support, or some mixture of both public and private funds could support an effort like this. There are a number of benefits, not only for the young people themselves, but as you alluded to the local and regional economy, for having assets that can be used to invest in the future of the young people who are involved.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Noah, what comes to mind when you think of hay?
That it's for horses?
Yeah, I could see that. But it's actually used on cattle farms, too, as a source of food. Many cattle farmers make their own hay, but one expert is saying that some farmers should shift away from hay production.
Whoa, what are they going to eat?
Well, Missouri Business Alert's Yasha Mikołajczyk talked to Carson Roberts, State Extension Forage Specialist for the University of Missouri, to get a sense of why he thinks making hay may be hurting some farmers' bottom lines. Here's that conversation.
Why would farmers, for example, like do things where they have the both or have calf cattle production, but also then make hay in the springtime?
Well, the surplus of forage in the springtime is a big one. A lot of people, myself included, enjoy making hay. It's somewhat fun. It's almost like playing in a sandbox as an adult. You get to drive the tractor, you get to drive the baler. It's fun, really, it is. Um, and so there's that piece of it. A lot of producers enjoy it. They enjoy the tractor, they enjoy the baler, and they enjoy working on equipment. Another one is the perception that we can make it for cheaper than we could purchase it. And that's a big one. The other one is the fear that if we don't make it, we won't be able to find any for our cows come wintertime.
You mentioned we make it cheaper. We can make it cheaper than we can purchase it. Can you get into that?
If you're doing back of the napkin math, it somewhat makes sense. But if you dive deeper into the numbers, you realize that you may not be making money. There's a couple of reasons why a farmer would think that they are making it cheaper than they're purchasing. One is that they are using land that does not have a land payment attached to it. Typically, that's land that's been inherited or been paid off. It's in the family, and so they don't have that land expense. Another one is labor. It's hard work. You're out there, and it's typically in the middle of the summertime, and it's sweaty and hot and hard work, and it takes time. And so, how are you valuing your time? And if you're a true business person, then you are going to evaluate your time and charge your business that time accordingly. So that's another big one. And many of the producers that work on their own equipment still aren't charging themselves the time that it takes to work on that equipment. Fertility, sometimes some producers will skimp on fertility fertilizers. And usually that can be done to a certain extent. So over the course of a few years, the fertilizer is going to be drained out of the soil, basically mined out of the soil by removing the forage and never putting anything back. And so sometimes you forget to calculate that in. Um, Sometimes you don't calculate your equipment costs. And that one's kind of surprising to me, but oftentimes people forget that they have to pay for their equipment. Oftentimes they'll put in there the expense of repairs and stuff, but hey, I own the equipment, and so they don't calculate that cost of what's the opportunity cost if I didn't own the equipment.
Like, how do equipment inflation compared to cattle prices affect like the long-term profitability for like smaller or more mid-sized farms?
So small farms are very exposed to this issue, right? Because they are um, they usually, small farms have more equipment per animal than what a larger farm that's operating on economies of scale could have, right? Because maybe a bigger ranch could get away with X number of one tractor to feed their animals during the winter. um, a small farm still needs that one tractor to feed their animals during the winter. So there's some economies to scale if for that. And as those equipment prices go up, it hurts smaller farmers more than it would hurt a person who's operating with some scale. Um, and so then some producers, you might have to get creative from there.
But is there a hesitancy to shift away from traditional haymaking?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Here's the big one. What do I do during a drought if I don't have hay? If I'm not making my own hay, where am I going to get hay when there's a drought and there's very little hay on the market? That's a huge concern that someone might have. And there's a few good arguments against of how to manage through that, because there are ways to manage through that. And I think one of those ways would be that you're planning ahead. So I've been just looking at some data on the hay prices since the 1980s till now, monthly hay prices. And typically hay costs the most during the winter time. January, February, and March are where hay is going to be most expensive. Hay is almost always cheap in July, June, and July. That's when it's the least expensive. So if you plan ahead a little and give yourself some margin of error, depending on how much drought has occurred, then you can purchase your hay at what would be a discount. The next thing is that you need to protect your grass, because that is what you're truly producing.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Now it's time for our words of the week. Juliana, what's your word today?
My word today is surgical smoke.
I don't know what that is, but it's got a cool name.
Unfortunately, it's not as cool as it sounds. Surgical smoke is a term for the dangerous smoke created during surgeries that contains toxic gases and charred tissue particles. The gas is produced by surgical tools like lasers and ultrasound devices. It's estimated that 90% of surgical operations release some of this smoke.
That is so nasty.
It is, but most St. Louis area hospitals say that they've installed equipment to get rid of surgical smoke. That's because Missouri passed a law in 2023 that required all hospitals and accredited surgical centers to have smoke elimination systems by the end of 2025. Illinois also enacted similar legislation in 2022. These new smoke elimination systems will protect everyone, including surgeons, hospital staffs, and patients. What's your word today?
My word this week is Wagyu.
Like the beef? I've never had it, but I've heard it's pretty hard to come by.
Well, finding premium Japanese Wagyu beef is difficult in the U.S., but Missouri farmers are starting to produce it instead. 51 Wagyu beef farms in Missouri are listed with the American Wagyu Association right now.
And what makes Wagyu beef so special?
Well, to be considered premium Wagyu, beef must come from purebred cows in specific parts of Japan raised to produce a certain fat to red meat ratio. A pretty small percentage of American cattle farmers actually have full-blooded stock since Japan stopped exporting cattle in 1997, but even crossbred cows go for impressive prices.
So it must be pretty expensive, huh?
Very. Ground crossbred Wagyu, crossbred with Angus beef, runs around $15 a pound, but cuts of Wagyu beef imported from Japan cost even more. A 12-ounce ribeye from overseas costs $134 on Amazon, and two 8-ounce fillets cost $250.
With prices like that, it's no wonder Missouri cattle producers are getting in on the game.
For sure.
Now it's time for our closing thought.
Our closing thought today comes from Carson Roberts, the state extension forage specialist we heard from earlier. He spoke to what he believes to be the most streamlined process for making or obtaining hay within a community.
This is something that honestly is better happened at the community level, because I guarantee there's a farmer near you. If you live in the state of Missouri, there's a farmer near you that is doing this effectively.
Well, that is all for this week. M33 Project and DeWolf provided the music for this episode. For my co-hosts Juliana Mejia and editors Kelly DeRook and Michael Stacy, I'm Noah Grabianski. Thank you for listening.